Getting really live. Yeah, it's like, it might not a whole lot, really.
There's people in this class I've never seen before. There's people in the class I've never seen before. Okay.
Hey. You know where your safe space is? Underneath your desk. That's when the damn tornado comes, that safe space.
That's what I did in school. We did like the earthquake drill where we hid under the desk.
Yeah, they told you to go like this.
Just leave your helmet on.
You probably I'm gonna have her dad get a job with the Texas Rangers. I'll be the new hitting coach.
All right.
They call me Rudy Arabello Jr.
If you don't have the file, raise your hand and we'll forward it to you.
Did you get my email?
I did.
No.
I got it.
Sometimes the file is a little bit slow to send.
I got it here, but not here.
Two emails.
One, I forgot to attach the file. I hit send too early. So then I just didn't address it and I just sent another one.
Don't worry, it's all one.
Yeah, normally it says you forgot to attach, but it didn't say that. So. Okay.
Yeah. That big shot straight and then one shoot out.
No joke.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
But they were shooting over on it.
There you go.
These guys
Yeah.
Decide that fast, but you trigger the pull, you know?
Yeah, I'm not on this list.
Oh, that's right, yeah, if you're the first one, I guess, you're kind of screwed.
Did they do a throw first?
Yeah. Last time I did one of those was, right, I got it.
I went out there and shot a bunch of shells. They grew up in first flavors and then started growing. Ron was busting them off the pocket.
I wasn't there that time. I don't think so.
I'm ready. I'm ready when you guys are.
We're ready.
Okay. There's a lot of people in this class. So I guess people that didn't come to other ones, maybe. What? All right. Okay, can you guys all hear me? Okay, perfect. Okay, so last time I'll kind of recap where we went off here. So we, from what we had planned on for class 3, we didn't get through all of it. So where we ended with class 3 was tying together our schedule with everything, and then making our logic, and then having our critical path, right? And then we ended with the 3-week look ahead. Is that, anyone remember? I mean, that's what we ended with. Okay. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to go through actually setting our baseline as a baseline to the file. We're also going to go through making sure everything matches the contract dates. This is theoretical right now, but we would make sure that. And then we're going to go through how to add constraints and then how to actually show your baseline bars on your file. And then from there, we're going to go through the process of a schedule update. Any questions or anything that you'd like to recap from last time? That would be anything with how to add certain logic ties, how to trace logic in the schedule, anything that we've done up to now. Is there anything that you do want to recap? And if you do, that's totally fine. We did that in the last class. But if you guys feel good to go from the 3-week look ahead on, we can just start from there. Okay, sounds good. All right. So does everybody have the file that was emailed over? Does anybody still need it? If you weren't on today's Teams invite, then you don't have it probably. So you can just raise your hand and I can send it to you if anyone doesn't have it. And it's okay to raise your hand if you don't have it.
Would be in that one or last?
You can use your last one too if you want to. Yeah, if you have it saved. Okay, so everyone has it open and is good to go? Okay, perfect. So you should see that your schedule is fully tied in all together. If you go to the view ribbon at the top and then filter for the critical path, so view and then filter and go to critical, you should see that your tracking substantial completion milestone is on the critical path. You should see that the weather days are on the critical path. Those are the things that you see right up at the top. Everybody see that? And then as you scroll through, it starts with the city pre-con, and then it runs through your critical path sequence, which we have the site work, and then your building structure, and then it goes through the rest of the building. So this is what you should see starting off with the class today. Anyone have any questions? Okay, perfect. All right. So if you were making your baseline schedule, you can go ahead and take the filter off. I'm going to go to view and then no filter. So if you were making your baseline schedule for your project, you would make sure that your baseline matches your tracking substantial completion date and the contract substantial completion date. You would want those two to match. Does that make sense? You want to use that basically your full contract time. So that would be the step one, is you would say, okay, do these match? And then step two, you're going to make sure that you're following any additional requirements. If you have other turnover milestones you have to meet, everything contractually, you want to make sure that that's set and taken care of. And then you want to make sure to validate your critical path, which basically is what we just did. So you would just filter for your critical path and just make sure that it seems accurate. You'll typically know if it's accurate or not based on what the project is. If it seems like it's incorrect, then that's when you may want to go back through and take a look at your file and just say, oh, am I missing something here? And then just address that right from the beginning. You always want to make sure that if you do encounter a delay to your critical path, that it is going to push out your critical path and push out your schedule. So that's the main thing there to validate the critical path, is if you were to have a delay early on, is it going to actually push out your schedule the way that it should? That would be the main concept there of what we look for. Any questions so far on any of that? Okay, so now we'll go through the different constraint types and adding constraints to the schedule. So let's add the columns for task constraint, or actually it's called constraint date, and then constraint type. Yeah, constraint type and constraint date. Both of them, yeah. Okay. Everybody able to show those columns? Okay, perfect. So if you click on the drop-down arrow, so we're going to focus first on the tracking substantial completion milestone. So if you click the drop-down arrow of the tracking substantial completion for the constraint type, you'll see a variety of different options on here. So the as soon as possible, that's just going to be your soonest possible date based on the logic in the schedule, or the as soon as possible. The as late as possible, that's going to be your schedule activity plus your float value. So if it's on the critical path, it's going to be the same. But the late date is basically going to be your early date, which would be the one that the schedule calculates, plus any float that you have on the activity. That's not utilized that much, except for maybe finding out like a latest delivery date. It's just very high risk because any date beyond it would push out your schedule. The must start on and must finish on, those are called hard constraints. So those won't move with the logic. And if you're early on a must finish on, it will show you float. So it'll show you float on that activity. Must start on, similar, it's going to force that date. And then if you have start no later than, or start no earlier than is the constraint that you would use for a notice to proceed date. So if your notice to proceed, so say you have design incorporated into your schedule, so notice to proceed is later, you would have a start no earlier than for that notice to proceed date, because you don't want the date to be moved back earlier. Does that make sense? Okay, and then finish no later than is the constraint that we'll want to use for the tracking substantial. So we want it to be able to push out if you are behind schedule, you want it to show that, but it'll still show 0 float on the critical path if you're early. Any questions there? Correct, yeah. No, it's going to stay as soon as possible unless you actually give a constraint to that activity. Yeah, if you were to move the activity, if you were to click on this and move it to a different date, it will add a constraint to it just automatically, because that's what it will do to hold that date. But unless you like intentionally add a constraint, or I guess that would be an accidental one if you did that, but you have to add it or it's going to be as soon as possible. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, if you like accidentally click the start and then click a date by accident, it'll add a constraint there. Yeah. Like I just did it just then. I clicked on it. All right, so what we'll do for the tracking substantial, we'll change this to finish no later than. And then when the pop-up window comes up, this is just telling you about the float. So if you're behind, it's going to show behind. So say continue, a finish no later than constraint will be set. Okay. I'm also going to show the finish Slack column. That's your float. Microsoft Project calls your float finish Slack. Or that would be your float on the finish date of that activity. There's start Slack too, that would be float on the start date, but the finish Slack is the one that typically people care about because it's the finish date. All right. Okay, so then you can see that finish no later than, it has 0 days of float on it, and it auto-populates with the date that we have in there. If you're finished no later than constraint, if your contract date was actually supposed to be earlier, you could just manually change your constraint date to be the date that it's supposed to be. Any questions on that? Okay, and then for the contract substantial completion, this is one, I don't know how we have it. We have it tied in just following your tracking substantial right now. But if you wanted to take away the logic on it and have just a must finish on, we could do that as well. Do you want to go through that? Do that? Okay, perfect. So instead of, do you see how the predecessor is number 6? Okay, so delete that predecessor and let the activity jump back to the start date of the project. Okay, is your date, okay. Everyone able to remove their predecessor from line 7? Okay, so now we'll just say this is going to be a must finish on. If we did finish on or before, it's going to be before, it's still going to stay early. So we're going to do must finish on. And then you can actually just either drag down this constraint date to keep the same date, or you could manually change the date to the one that you want. It's up to you, whichever one you prefer. You could either use the calendar to change it, or you can just copy it from the cell that's right above it to make it that same 617. So then regardless of anything else, this is going to stay here and it's not going to move because it's not tied into anything. It's just reflecting that date that you have to meet. Any questions on that? Okay. All right.
If we have change orders that
Mhm.
adjust that,
Yeah.
then we have
Mhm.
it must be
Not gonna increase. or
Um,
duration.
Right, you would have to do like a must start on, or you could add another activity after your original contract date, and you could have that time frame of what was added. You could do it either way. So you could do must start on and then increase the duration, or you could just change your must finish on constraint to the later date. Okay. The only thing is, if you are ahead of schedule and early, this way will take off your critical path. So that is the downside of it. There's a couple different ways that you can get around that. You can add like a float item that just takes you to the contract date so that you basically manually put your critical path back. Or you could add like a final punch list that goes beyond it. Any questions there? Is this the class where we talked about that last time? Or was that the other? Okay, that must have been a different class. We can do an exercise as we update to show where it's early to see where you can change that to get your critical path back. But it would really be your preference of what method you prefer. Usually people will either just do like a final clean or something, or like a contractor punch at the very end that you would change the duration of so that you're not early. That's one that I typically see people use. But if you do want to show early, then you can just add something that's after the tracking substantial that just gets you to the contract date. Okay, any questions from here? Okay, so we have our constraint date set. So then if we are behind in our schedule, it will show a negative float. So let's go back to filtering for the critical path. So go to your filter and go back to critical. And let's scroll down to, this is just for the example, to the rough grade. Increase the rough grade duration from 15 days to 20 days. And you should all see a -5 come up. If you do add your float column, you can add finish slack or total slack, whichever one you prefer. You should see -5. So this is just a test that we have the right constraint on. So if you were to be behind, it's going to push out the schedule as you anticipate. So then we can put it back to 15 to show on time because we're still in the exercise of this is our baseline. Okay. So then from here, I'm going to take off the filter again. From here, this would be our final baseline schedule. And this would be the one that we would want to change the name to baseline at the top. I like to change the names at the top. That's up to you if you want to or not. I usually change the name to baseline and then I'll change it to the update date so that as soon as you open the file or if you look at a printout, you know right away what that's from. Does that make sense? Maybe? No one's talking. Okay. No, I mean, it's your own preference. You don't have to add that, but I just like to see it as soon as you open a printout. All right. So then now let's set this as a baseline to the file. So there's 2 steps that you need to take. So you have to save the file as a baseline for that actual Microsoft project file. And you want to save that and then basically close that file and keep it and not reopen it again unless you need it, because you never want to override your actual baseline schedule file. Does that make sense? So you don't want to take your baseline file and then put the updates into that. You want to make a copy of the file and then rename it to your first update so that you still have that file for the baseline. All right. So first, and this doesn't matter, we can do this before or after we save the baseline file as its own, because this is just storing the baseline to this file. So there's the step of keeping the baseline as a separate file, and then there's the step of storing the baseline as a baseline to the file, which that's just copying the data in a moment in time, if that makes sense. Any questions on that? Okay. So go to the project ribbon at the top. And then do you see where it says set baseline? Anyone with the dinging have any questions? Okay.
I'm still trying to get building pad.
Okay. The building pad, do you have it tied in already?
Up in the,
Okay.
I know it's 63.
Yeah, usually if you hit the escape key, it'll, it's right under the rough grade. Is your rough grade 15 days or 20? Okay, okay. And what's your date on building pad?
You're right.
7-11.
You're exactly right. You're
Okay.
in good shape.
But down in predecessor, I got 62 upgrade, and I thought,
No, your building pad is building pad, so your rough grade would be rough grade before building pad. So you're exactly where you need to be. So look at mine, see mine, on the building pad, 7-Eleven.
Anybody else?
Right here, rough grade 62, you're where you need to be. You're trying to link it to itself, and that's why you were getting the dong and the noise.
there.
You look good.
Okay. Okay, is everybody good? Okay, perfect. So before we do this last step, if you want, you can hide the columns for constraint date and for constraint type. And then add the columns for baseline start, baseline finish. And then we're going to add a third column for finish variance. So baseline start, baseline finish, and finish variance. And finish variance.
Oh, finish variance.
Yeah, finish variance, which will be from the baseline. Yeah, you can hide those now.
You can just put it right there, click on that one, it'll push all those to the right, they'll still be there.
Choice, you just type in baseline variance.
Yeah, finish
VA,
finish
and it'll
variance.
pull it up, it'll give you
Getting rid of So baseline start, baseline finish, and finish variance. Yeah. Okay. Everybody good there? Okay.
Now, earlier you were saying something about go to project and then the baseline.
Yeah.
We're supposed to do anything there?
We're gonna set it. The columns are just to show what happens when we set it. Yeah. Okay. Everybody ready for the next step? Okay, perfect. So now back to where we left off, go to the project ribbon and where it says set baseline, choose set baseline. Finish variance. Okay. Yeah, so set baseline and then set baseline to, so there's 11 different options of where to store your baseline. The baseline without a number is where this finish variance is going to pull from. So for your contract schedule, make it your baseline. And you can always re-baseline a schedule if you end up rephasing and you want to have a new point of comparison. But basically your baseline without a number is going to be like your contractual point of comparison to your file. Does that make sense? And you can always make a copy of your schedule and change that and override it if you wanted to look at a different scenario. That's fine, but typically the baseline that's stored is just your contractual schedule that you will be comparing back to. Okay, so it says set baseline. So this is in the project ribbon, set baseline, and we're going to set it to the first baseline option, which is the default. And we're going to say entire project. Any questions there? Okay, so when you say okay, you'll see these columns that we added, you'll see them populate in with data. Are you ready? So then say okay. And you should see this is basically an exact clone of your schedule that's stored as the baseline for the file. But the important thing is you cannot revert this back to its own file. So that's why you have to be careful to save the file as well, because you can't restore what's in here. This is just like a copy and paste of data. Does that make sense? Okay. Sure. So set baseline. And then oh, it says last saved. Is it today?
9/13, yeah.
Okay, then you have it stored. Then you're good. You can save, you can override it, save it again. That would be fine. That's okay. Yeah. Okay, any questions on this? Okay. So then if you want to show the bars for the baseline, go to the Gantt chart format or your format ribbon on the far right. And underneath the format, it says baseline. Everybody see the word baseline? It's like right underneath the words. If you click on that drop down, you'll see the baseline that we just saved. Okay, so click on that, and then you should see the bars appear on your bar chart in gray underneath your existing activities. So if you toggle that on and off, you'll see it just be the red bars, and then the gray bars go underneath it. So that's your baseline bars that it's showing. So then if we were to go back to really anything you wanted to go to, but if we were to go back to the rough grade and then make it 20 again, you'll see that the bars are now shifted. They're no longer right on top of each other. So it was at 15 where all the bars were lining up. And then if you make it 20, you'll see how the baseline stays. Yeah, and then the rest of it pushes. We can put this back to 15 for now. That was just for showing you how the bars will stay. And then this would be the last step of saving your baseline. And then we would save it as its own baseline file that stays as is. And then you don't overwrite that file with updates. Any questions on that? Okay, perfect. So then from here, what you would do from here is, when you open up, you would basically take this file that we're in, and then in your file explorer, copy it. So make a copy and then paste it. And then rename the pasted one to, you could say update 1, or you could say the date of the update, whatever you want to call it for the naming convention. It doesn't matter. But you just want to make sure that you decipher between which one's the baseline and which one is your first update. Any questions on the copy and paste in your file window? Yeah. No, that's fine. So this is just where I have the file saved. So this is the file that I sent you guys that I have it saved. So that's the baseline file.
Just went and renamed it there.
So I just made a copy of it and then pasted a copy. So then from here, I would open update 1. And then I can see at the top, this is my update 1 file. And then I can rename it from baseline to update 1. So then I know that they're separate files. If I ever have to go back to my baseline, then I have it there. And if you ever have to show a delay, typically you would use the schedule just prior to the start of the delay to show the impact. So you never know when that's going to be. So you have to save each week's file in case you have a delay next week. Any questions there? Otherwise, you'd have to go back and recreate it, and it just would be a lot easier to just save them as you go. Or however frequency, if you update bi-weekly or monthly, you would just save the file each time. Okay. Any questions up till now before we actually go through the process of doing a schedule update? Okay. All right. So for the schedule update, there's a few different things that we're going to look at. So we're going to look at the comparison to the baseline to see where we're gaining and losing time. We're going to see, so this variance is going to show us how many days difference this is from the baseline file. And then your finished slack or total slack, whichever one you have shown, that's going to show you how much float you have on the project based on what your contract finish date is and the logic that we have in our baseline and the logic that we have in the schedule overall. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So if we were to do a mock schedule update, we could do one that is for through the month of June, since the start date of this is June 10th. What we'll want to do is our status date is not set because it was the baseline, but we can set our status date so that we get a window of time. We can set it to just the day before the start. So we can set it to 6/9, and that would just be for, okay, that's the original date that the information was current up until. So because it's a baseline, it's not current, it's all baseline. So there wouldn't be any actuals in the file. So where it says NA for the status date, let's go ahead and change that to 6/9, and that's because that's just the day before you start the project. We're going to end up updating the data date in this update and saving a new one. But just to have it set, we're going to change it from the NA to 6/9/24. Any questions on why we're choosing that date? Just because it's before the baseline. Yeah, because the baseline starts on 6/10. So that's just for the sake of having it set. You don't really have to do that step, but just so that we have a window that has lines on both sides, we're just setting it so that you're saying, okay, the baseline date essentially is just the day before 6/10, the day before you start. You don't have to do that step in your baseline. You can leave your baseline without a status date. That would be fine too. And then in your grid lines, or any questions on how we added the status date?
Reason why? 8 to 6, 10. Am I supposed to be focused on critical?
No.
All mine say 6/10, like all my miles. Yeah, my whole schedule, no filter.
What's your tracking substantial date?
I opened the schedule. I went and copied it.
Okay. So then right click in your Gantt chart and there's an option called grid lines. So right click and select grid lines. So when you have this pop-up window for grid lines, scroll down to status date. So right click just anywhere in the Gantt chart here and then select grid lines. It's the first option. Okay. And then now that we have a status date set, and again, for your baseline, you don't have to set one. You can leave it blank. It doesn't matter. But scroll down to status date. And then for the type, make it a solid line. So that means that we're just going to show the status date visually. And that's just going to make it so that we have a window of time to look at for this update. So we right clicked, went to grid lines, scroll down to the status date, and then the solid line is what we'll show. And then you should see a green line and then your solid line. Any questions there? Okay, that would be, it may be, you may have to minimize your time scale to be smaller if you don't see it. Okay, so if we were updating the schedule, this time window would be the time window that we're essentially applying actuals to in our schedule for this update period. Does that make sense? And it would be, ideally, it would be a smaller window. So we'll break this up into chunks for this exercise, and we'll do June, July, and August. Or we could do June to end of July, August, September, whatever. But we'll go through the process of doing the updates 1 month at a time. So then if you want to follow along, the first thing I'm going to do, just so that we have a narrower window of time, I'm just going to tell the software that it's July 1st so that our green line comes back to here. And that would just be pretending that today's July 1st and we're doing our first update. So this is something you would not have to do normally because your current date would be the date that you want it to be. We're just going back in time just for this exercise. Okay, so go to File and then Info. And then where it says current date is today, this is what you always want it to be because you're going to be updating to today. But we're saying that it's July 1st today. So we're going to change that and just say current date's July 1st. So now we have a shorter window of time that we're going to be updating our schedule through. So now we don't have as many activities. This is just, again, this is just for this exercise. Yeah. I've seen it just like automatically go back to the current date. Once you save the file and reopen it, it'll want to go back. It depends on just how it's acting on your software. You may have to manually change it back, but as soon as you update your status date again, it should readjust. But normally you wouldn't be adjusting the current date anyway, so it's always going to be correct. Okay, so I'm going to call this update 1, and then I'm going to call it July 1st, 2024, because that is what we're going to update the actuals up until. Any questions on that? If you have any questions, it's okay. You can. Okay. I just changed the title. Wait, which part of it? It was just in the title of the project. Yeah, just the first row. So that's just so when I open the file, I know that this is the July 1st schedule update. Yeah. Okay. So from here on, I'm going to minimize the pre-construction since we didn't update this. So I'm going to minimize the submittals and the pre-construction. And we'll start off with just the construction activities because that's what we're gonna be updating. Okay, so from here, this will be like a mock update of things that happen, and somebody who wants to be the one to answer the questions or be the one that says yes or no to something happening or the dates. Okay. Then we'll just go through and you can just make up delays as we go or make up scenarios that are things that you've either encountered in the past or would just want to see how it's reflected as you go through the update. Any questions? Okay, so we'll start with the pre-con. We'll say, did your pre-con happen on time on June 10th? Okay, and did you mobilize on the 11th through the 17th? Okay, and did you start rough grading on the 18th? Okay, why not? Okay, so we can add an activity here then. So we'll add an activity above line 62 for rough grade. So I'm just going to right click and say insert task. And then what you'll want to do for this task, for this delay, you want to wedge it in between where it was. So the rough grade was supposed to directly follow the mobilization. So we want this delay activity to be in between Ridgemont mobilized and the rough grade starting. Any questions there? Okay, so then I'm going to use my control key. I'm going to click on the Ridgemont mobilize and then control click on the new task and then control click on rough grade. And then in the task ribbon, I'll use the link tool to tie those together. So now this new delay task is wedged in between where the schedule path was supposed to be.
I got it split. So click Ridgemont mobilize.
Yep.
Control new task and rough grade.
Yep.
And then click the link.
Yep. Okay. Okay, and you said it was RPMX, RPM delay. Okay, so we'll call it RPM delay. I always put an asterisk just because I feel like it makes it stand out. You don't have to do that. That's just like my habit is if it's a delay, I just put that in front of it so you see it. And then I'm going to make it 15 days because that was how long they delayed you. Made the duration 15 days. Yeah, it's in the format ribbon. And then baseline, do you have your baseline set or was that on the other file?
I did set it.
Okay.
Then you take RPM delay,
Mhm.
control, down to rough grade and linkage.
Yes, yeah, so you should have the predecessor should be mobilized. And then the successor should be rough grade. Okay. Okay.
Control delay.
Yep. So mobilize, RPM delay, and then rough grade.
So control, delay,
Mhm.
mobilize,
Yep.
and then rough grade.
Mobilize, and then the delay, and then rough grade. Yep. And then click the link tool to link the tasks together. It's in task. Okay. Sweat.
Finish slack.
Okay, it should say -15.
It's got all kinds.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So then we called,
Construction, I got mine.
it's probably because there's a cure in there somewhere that's gaining you a day, I guess.
Finish slack is all in the light blue now. Liquid or?
Yes, so the light blue means that a change was made, and then it'll go back to normal. Okay. Okay. Okay, so you should see that it says -15 in your finished slack, and then the finished variance of the delay should say 0, and you should have NA. That's because this delay was not in the baseline, so it should say NA, and then 0, but your finished slack will be -15. The finished variance will be 15 on the rough grade. Those are flipped. For some reason, it's not a minus. It's positive. I don't know why it's opposite like that. Is anyone still working on it and getting caught up? Okay. Just that your baseline column should be NA for the delay. And then you should have a -15 for your finished slack.
No.
Okay, perfect. So then if you scroll through, if you just scroll down, you should see that now all of your activities following rough grade are pushed out that same gap of 15 days from your baseline bar to your regular bar. Does everybody see that? Okay. So then if you scroll up to the top of your schedule, you should see that your tracking substantial completion date is now 22 calendar days behind. So that 15 working day delay pushed you out 22 calendar days overall. All right. Any questions on how we're seeing that? Any questions on the difference of the tracking substantial completion variance? Okay. It's basically just day for day, and then you jump over 4th of July. So that's why it's 21 calendar days. Why it's pushing over. Okay, so then this would be it, and this would be our schedule update for the month of June up through July 1st, because all we had was we were supposed to start rough grading. We have a delay there, and that's all that there is as of July 1st. Any questions on that? Okay. So then from here, we'll update the progress of the schedule and move the status date to July 1st. So in order to do that, if you'd like to see the actual start and finish columns fill in, we can show those columns as well. You don't have to show the columns, but I'll show them just so that you guys can see what happens. So I'm going to insert the column for actual start, and I'm going to insert the column for actual finish. So the important thing is, if you are going to use because you can also just plug in the actual start and finish into the columns if you want to. I always update them and apply them all at one time, just to make sure that everything's following the logic of the order things actually did happen on your project. But in order to do that, you do have to make sure that everything within this window of time that we're looking at here is accurate for those dates within those windows. So we would have to say, okay, the dates here we have updated to be reflecting the actual dates where things happened. And when we apply our actuals, they're going to be correct. So really your risk here would be if there's a chain that's starting too early that you don't want it to start early. You just have to make sure that everything in this window is something that you did go over and you did say, yes, that's correct. Yes, that's not correct. And you made your updates, just like we did here with the rough grade, where we said, no, rough grade hadn't started. We pushed it out from the delay. So now it's no longer in that window of time. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay. So then go to the project ribbon at the top and then click on, it's underneath status date. We're going to leave the status date as is, but we're going to click on update project. So in the project ribbon, click on update project. You should see this pop-up window where it says update work as complete through. This is where we'll change the date.
Did you not change the status to 7-1?
No, I left it the same. Yeah. That's okay. So click on the update project and then change this to 7-1. Okay. Is everybody good here? Okay, so then when you click OK, you'll see that your actuals fill in for you. So when I click OK, you can say for the planning wizard, you can just say, don't tell me this again. It's just saying that it's rescheduling certain tasks. You can just leave it.
You're supposed to check if they'll reschedule uncomplete items.
No, you'll say update as complete through the 0 to 100%.
Explain to me the difference between the two, please.
Sure.
I know the difference, but
Yeah.
I've never chose that one.
So if you reschedule the dates, it pushes everything out that doesn't have an actual on it. And then the first option is you're applying the actuals to those dates. So then when I say okay, it applies the actuals for me so that I don't have to manually put them in for each one.
So if you're putting in actual starts as
Mhm.
it's happening,
Mhm.
like say for example, they don't on certain days or whatever,
Mhm.
you're doing that, you would use the other option.
Well, the delay that we added will act as what's pushing it out. You could update that way if you want to. That's not wrong. If you want to use that way, because I know that's really common for people that are already doing it. They'll plug in the actuals and then you can bump everything out. This one would just apply the actuals for everything within that window for us. But then we would have to add this activity here to bump out the rough grade, but then that also helps us to identify the delay as well. Any questions on this right here? Okay. Yeah. You can hit the plus sign down here at the bottom. Do you see these plus and minus? Oh, I'm not scrolling. You can hit plus and it'll make it wider. Okay, I'll do that last part again. Oh wait, I hit undo. I'm gonna just take out the actuals and then redo it. Okay, so all we did here is we made sure everything was reflected in this window of time. And then I went to update project and then updated work as complete through July 1st. And so I did the first option here. So update work as complete through July 1st. The second option will bump everything out that doesn't have an actual to be later, where you may miss a delay that happened if you bump something out when you didn't need to. So, but you do have to make sure, like we just did, that everything is reflected with the correct date. So then when I say update work as complete through, and when I click OK, it's going to fill in the actuals for me. So now my actuals are applied and it moved my status date for me to July 1st. Any questions? Okay. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Mhm. You could either like put, we could do like a weather day in this next one. You'd either split the activity so that you have the weather in between, or you could just like denote it in the description and just make it be a day longer. So it's whatever you prefer. You could either, a lot of people like to split it so that you have that gap there. And you could either have 2 activities with the weather in between, or you could split it with the weather in between, where that would be like the dotted lines. Or you can just say this took longer and you could just list in the description the dates where it rained, like if you maybe worked a half day or something and you weren't losing production for the whole day. That's okay.
You
Yeah.
can show them, like, putting in the, one day
Mhm.
weather delay.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah. This way it just like calculates it for you just based on the duration. So if you're like 1 day in a 4, it'll be 25%. But then if you were to make it longer, it would then change it to it would just change it based on the duration of the activity. Yeah. Does that answer your question or? Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on and we'll do an August 1st update and we'll update through the month of July. Everyone good there? Okay. So then from here, you would also save the file and then close it because that's our July update. That's our July 1st update. We don't want to change it. So then we would go back and say, okay, this is update 1. We're going to make a copy of it. And then now we're going to paste it to be update 2. The reason that I copy and paste it in the file folder is just because it's easy to do it backwards on accident when you're like saving as. So I just like to have it in the file folder just in case. And then also if somebody else has the file open, you know that you're not in their file. Did you forget to save something? It's okay. It's fine. Okay, so then now I have my copy of update 2, and this is just the method that I prefer just because it's easy for me to flip them by accident. So I like to make the copy here, and then I also like to make sure that no one else has it open. So then now I know this is the copy that I just made for update 2. I know that nobody has it open. So now I'm going to double click and open this. And I'm going to rename the top of it update 2 and then August 1st. And then when you guys are ready with that, just let me know. I don't want to rush you guys on that.
populated and actual start date on the whole.
On every activity?
Yeah.
Can you hit undo or did
I
you?
hit undo and it's saved. Like, so I go back and so it says NA on it on my actual chart.
Mhm.
The whole thing is NA. And then I go to the project.
Mhm.
I go to update project. I have update 271.
Okay.
Set 0 to 100. The only thing that's checked after that would be okay.
Mhm.
And okay. And it throws actual start dates for the whole.
Okay. Are you still in the file that has all the dates on 6/10?
I think. Yes.
Okay. So then you should see, you may have a different file where there's dates that are later than that. If you still have the one, because I know you had before open the one where the tracking substantial even before you applied it was 6/10.
Yeah, I'm a 7/9.
Okay.
17.
And then are there actuals in these?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. My actual source
Did you update it to 7/1 of 25?
7/1.
Or did you do 24?
But I did do 7/1 of 25.
Okay.
Okay, that was the problem.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. You know, I thought I was all along. Sorry to
No,
bother.
that's okay. That is all right. Okay, so now we're going to be doing our update 2, and we're going to update from July 1st until August 1st. So you can see the start of our window is the July 1st status date. The current date now went back to what it actually should be. So I'm going to do the same thing where I change the current date to be August 1st, pretending that today's August 1st. So I did that in File, Info, and I'm just changing it to August 1st. This is just so that it's easier to see in between those lines. Again, not something that you'll have to do. So now we have our schedule update number 2 that we're doing, and we're going from July 1st to August 1st. When you guys are ready for the next step, just like raise your hand or something. Okay. Okay, it's about half. Okay. Okay. Is anybody still working on copying the file? It's okay if you are. Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now if you wanted to, you could go to View and you could filter for incomplete tasks, because now we don't really care about anything that's already finished in the past as far as updating, because we already know it's done. So let's go to View, and then in the Filter dropdown, select Incomplete Tasks. So now when you scroll down, it should start with that earthwork delay that we added in last time. Okay, so now we're going to update. So in our last schedule update, we projected that they would be on site to start rough grading on July 11th. Did that happen? Chris, or if anybody wants to answer it. Okay, all right. And then did the rough grade finish on the 31st? Did they finish earlier or later? Okay, when did they finish? Okay, so they only took 8 days to do the rough grade. So then we're just going to change the rough grade to 8 days, because they actually finished on Monday, 7/22. So they just made up, we were 22 days behind overall, and they just made up so much time that now you're only 10 days behind. So when you do plug in the actual start and finish, instead of updating the progress, it takes away your float value for that activity. So if you leave those off and apply them at the end, you can see your float value changes as you go. Does that make sense? Like as we just made this change, we can see that now the float on that activity went down to 8, and your schedule drew back to just be 10 days behind. So those are just the things that you can see if you do a forward update, meaning like you go through the logic forwards and then apply the actuals versus backtracking it. you can just see live like how much time they're losing or gaining as you go through your update. So all we've done so far is we switched this rough grade from 15 days to 8 days because they finished early. So they finished this on 7/22, and that's what we're reflecting. Any questions there? Okay, so now the building pad, did that start on 7/23? Okay, so what day did that start? Okay, so if they started on 7/5, so that would be saying that because of the RPM delay, you resequenced and you started it early, is that right? Okay, so then we would have to actually change the predecessor of the building pad to be earlier and start on 7/5 rather than follow the rough grade like we had planned. Any questions on that? Okay, so he's saying that he's saying that we resequenced and did the building pad first because you were trying to mitigate the delay time. Would you agree? That okay? Yes. So now we just have to change the sequence in the schedule to reflect the sequence that actually happened. Yes. So we're going to change it. So we're going to say that instead of this following the rough grade, we're going to say that it overlapped with the delay to the rough grade. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. I mean, we're following this example. So, okay. So we're going to say that you were delayed, so you started where you could, regardless of if this, you know. So we're going to take the RPM delay. We're going to make that the predecessor to the building pad. So I'm going to tie together the RPM delay and the building pad, link those together. And then now remove the predecessor for rough grade because we're saying that this happened before rough grade. One thing that we do need to look at before we do this is the successors that are on building pad. Do any of these successors need to be carried over to follow the rough grade activity now to follow the end of this chain? Does your layout and grade pad have to follow rough grade? No? Okay. Does your blue top for paving have to follow rough grade? Okay. So then we're going to say that the rough grade successor, we're going to add the blue top for paving so that that doesn't draw back too early. Does that make sense? Okay. So the building pad, when this goes back early, we just want to make sure that because we are changing the sequence, we're saying, okay, well, blue top for paving still has to follow this whole sequence. So we're going to make sure that that's also a successor to the rough grade. These examples are way harder than the last class. So, sorry. The last class was like, we had a weather delay this day. Okay, so now we can change. So now we'll remove the predecessor for the rough grade. We'll remove the rough grade predecessor from building pad. So delete that. It'll draw the building pad date back when you do that. Okay, but now we want to show it on 7/5. So we know that it actually has to overlap with this delay. So that's where we're going to make it a start to start. And we're going to choose the lag value to overlap it correctly where it starts on 7/5 because that's the day that they started. Does it make sense why we're changing the logic to be this? Yeah, we're changing it to be the order where things actually happened in this scenario. So we're saying you were delayed, you didn't want to just wait around. So during that delay period, you decided that on 7/5 you were going to start this. So is it 10 days?
Yeah, actually. Oh, 7/5. So
Yeah. We might have 7/5 blocked off as a holiday. Okay, so we'll say that it started on 7/3.
there you go.
11. So 11 days in, they started the building pad. And then did the building pad finish on 7/11? Okay. All right. And then the blue top for paving that could have started after both rough grade and building pad, did that start on 7/23? Okay. And it was just one day. Okay. So we're good there. So then with these changes, now we see that, okay, our utility work, this now drew back because you have gained that time. So we're going to look at the ones that are now falling in this window of time. Do you guys see that? Okay. And am I going too fast? Do you guys want me to? Okay. I'll wait. Okay, I'll wait. When you guys are done with getting the building pad to be 7.3, let me know. Yeah. Okay.
It starts at
You said
3,
rough
finish
grade.
7.
Yeah,
What's rough
that's
grade
correct.
should- the Successors,
The successor to rough grade should be,
do we add blue top to it?
we added blue top for paving, yes. So it should be Stormline A and blue top for paving.
Actually, blue top is starting on the 20.
Yes, yeah.
Shit.
It ain't letting me change.
So rough grade.
So you have to change the logic.
The logic, you gotta change that.
What we move blue top?
It's following rough grade.
The screen.
Get that earlier. Get hit okay every time. Did it? You have a touch screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll hit it for you.
Okay, how do I get rid of the
One successor. 590 and 9.
how to get rid of milestone? I gotta go again to there. And
Hit it from there, you can click on that number 7.
well, okay. I need this, I need-
Hit okay every time. If you don't do that, then it's not gonna take it. Like enter.
All right. Okay, so is everybody caught up? So basically what we did is we just flipped the order of the two because we said that now they went in a different order. So we're just reflecting that they did go in this order. So we're reflecting it with the dates, but then also with the logic that we show leading up to that. Any questions on that? And is everybody good to continue? Okay, perfect. So then we're in the utilities. We'll start with Stormline A. Did that start on 7/23? Okay. Why not? The blue topper paving still happened on 7/23? Okay. Okay. So we're gonna add a weather activity in here then. So we'll add an activity before Stormline A. And we'll say rain days. And it was 2 days of rain. It sounds like the rain was on 7/23 and 7/24. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the RPM delay, where we're going to put this rain day activity in between what the Stormline A was supposed to follow and the Stormline A starting. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay. Before I do this, I'm going to look at our finish date and see what our finish date is tracking to be. So it looks like right now, because we've done that sequence change, we're actually finishing early. We're finishing on July 11th. All right. So then I just want to see a reference point of where we were before we add this rain delay. So as of 7/23, you had actually gained so much time. You went from 22 days late to 6 days early. So that's how much time you've gained. So then now you've encountered the rain. So it looks like Stormline A was supposed to follow rough grade. So we're going to say, okay, the rain days are following rough grade. and they are pushing out the start of storm line A because it hasn't even started. So then the successor of the rain days is storm line A. So this is exactly like that first delay that we had. So we added the 2-day activity for the rain days. We have it following rough grade because that's what storm line A was supposed to follow. And then the successor of the rain days will be the storm line A start.
You don't have to put the successors, you know, once you put the predecessors in there, everything falls into place, correct?
If you do the predecessor of storm line A to be the rain days, as long as you have the rain days with the predecessor of rough grade and the successor of storm line A. Mm-hmm. So we're just like wedging this 2-day rain day in between that. So on the 23rd and 24th, we said it rained. So then you started storm line A on the 25th.
And you had to put that predecessor to the rain days so it would track flow properly. Is that why you actually had to do that?
So that it would push out the storm line A start date. But yes, yeah, so that it would count it in the chain. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If it's critical, if it actually pushes your finish date. So far with just pushing out the utilities, they have float on them, so they're not. But when we go down to this one that's critical, yeah, this one's critical. If the rain days also push this out, then yes, we would gain it from the bank. So depending on what your weather day bank is, if it's 3 per day or if it's or 3 per.
Speaking, if
Mhm.
you do have a rain delay through,
Yes.
and your bank was call it 20 days,
Mhm.
and you got 2 days,
Mhm.
you
You would decrease. Yeah. Yeah. But ideally the rain day, like this one's not a critical path rain day, but if you had a critical path one, yes, yeah, you would reduce it.
Do you
Mhm.
recommend like
If it's actually started, you could, yeah. He said that it hadn't started.
Yeah.
So we had it before. So if it hadn't started, I would just put it the rain days in between. But if it did start, then yes, I would split that.
well, because it won't show that it won't like split.
Right, yeah. It would have to have some sort of start for a portion of time on that day, yeah. Okay, any questions with this rain day delay that we added in? Okay, so then the last question for this update would be, did you finish storm line A on 7/31? Okay, Chris isn't paying attention. So we're saying yes, it's finished on 7/31. Okay, so then the sanitary sewer work, this pushed out with the storm line A updates. So the sanitary sewer work is now 8/1. We'll say that no, that didn't happen early. That's correct. So as long as everything within the 8/1 is correct, then we're good to go for these dates. So we updated that, okay, you did some work early here. You decreased the duration on rough grade. You were able to do that faster. You had rain before the storm work. And then everything else is just tracking after that is what we're saying. So then we do have this next portion, which is the fire lane. So then we would say, did the fire lane start on 7/24? We have a lot in this period of a month. So it did. And did it finish on 7/26? Okay, and are you doing the truck dock and ramp? Is it done? Okay, so then we would just change this duration. If it finished in 3 days, we're going to change this duration from 5 days to 3 days. And then that puts the FRP paving to start on 8/1. Is that scheduled to start? Yes, okay. Okay, so all that we've done so far since we added the rain days to storm line A, our next change was we said, okay, the truck dock and ramp happened in 3 days instead of 5 days. So here you can see you're actually almost back to on track with your baseline dates with your progress so far this month. Okay. Then we have one more section of the schedule to update. Are you guys ready to move down to the building? Okay. So then layout and grade pad, this is where this drew back significantly because it went before rough grade. So did the layout and grade pad actually start on 7/12? And did it finish on 7/18? And then did underground electrical start on 7/19? The other one was like definitely a lot easier of examples. It was like 1 delay a month, not like 5.
Okay, I'm already.
And behind.